Hey, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Up podcast. And because I love being a harbinger of chaos, today is what, episode 13? Y'all have 2 episodes left in the season. Sorry to disappoint.
What? Who y'all think y'all is? Y'all done got through a whole season. Love
Yeah,
that for us.
season is almost over, guys. I hope you know. This is a 15 episode season. We are getting ready for our live event. You heard that ad at the beginning of the show, so make sure you're getting your tickets. But with that, the live event is it's the symbol of our break for the summer, and some of us
Yeah.
couldn't be more excited. So
Listen, I think the timing is amazing, and I think that it's going to be like a good celebration of season 10. Like, okay,
mhm.
we just wrapped season 10. We're celebrating the wrap of season 10 with our first ever live event. It's giving alignment to me.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Like,
great.
and we're going to party hard. So make sure y'all come to the live event.
Yeah. It's been a great season though. I will say I noticed that when I was texting our guest for today, it clicked that we brought back multiple guests from previous seasons to the show. So I think it's very fitting that in our 10th season we went back to people who have done phenomenal episodes with us in the past, and we brought them on for some more phenomenal episodes in the current season. So with that, Tarik is here with us. Welcome back since, oh my gosh, when was the last time we do our episode? 2020?
I think so.
Yeah. We brought all the pandemic folks back. Welcome. We're happy to have you. Tarik is reporting from the Greater Changes headquarters, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah.
I just love to see all of the progress that Greater Changes has made, and y'all are literally living out dreams that I remember you talking about a couple of years ago. So I hope that you've patted yourself on the back every time you walk into that building, because that's amazing. And yeah, Tarik, for the people who don't know who you are, which I hope that no one is listening to this podcast and don't know who Tarik is, but introduce yourself. Tell the people what you do,
Yeah.
how you came to be.
The short version, I am a licensed professional counselor and one of the co-owners of Greater Changes. We do behavioral health in the Virgin Islands, in Florida, in New Mexico, and
Hmm.
in Colorado as well. So, yeah, I've been doing a lot of work. We focus on culturally intentional mental health care. So it's like it's cool. Like you said like we talked about doing a lot of things, and like we actually are like living out some of these dreams. Like the story of Greater Changes. I don't know if we've ever talked about it. Like just like the logo, like you made the first logo, and like I think when you made the first logo, it wasn't Greater Changes yet. It was Tarik McMillan Therapy.
Yeah.
And so you had like it was the tree and then the two images, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's me, and then like there's this other lady with like a ponytail. I didn't even know Tamara yet. So
Yeah.
like we met, and like it was like, yo, Tamara, I think this is us. So
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, like this whole thing is like a entire
Yeah.
dream come
It's
true,
like
really.
full
Not y'all
circle.
manifested this.
Yeah,
I just want to
yeah.
say when I created that, I still am an amateur graphic designer, and clip art at the time did not come with locks. And it was really important to me to find a way to make this character look like Tarik. So the things that I did to create locks in that graphic was just finessing at the ultimate level. But yeah, I every time I see, the new iteration of that logo and just like how far you all have come and the things you've been able to do, I'm just like chills, because your mission really it'll hot up my heart space in a good way. And yeah, I'm very proud of it. So congrats to both of you for everything that you've been able to accomplish. And I'm so excited to see where it goes from here, because I know you have some genius plans in a mind of yours. So I just excited to see where it goes.
Absolutely.
We are in for an interesting episode today, but as you all know, whenever we start the podcast, even if we're going to talk about something super important and near and dear to our hearts, we don't always start with love and then chaos, because that's who we are. So we're gonna start with Spotted being good up, which is where we celebrate people, we give them flowers. It doesn't matter what their qualifications are, who they are. They just made us feel good, or we observe them being good up. and we want to celebrate them. So with that, I want to give our guests a first go at this. Do you want to celebrate someone for being good up this week?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's definitely more than this week. I have to shout out Tamara. Tamara is like the most amazing person ever. She is like the reason why Greater Changes is doing the things that we're doing. I met Tamara, shoot, when I was making like $35 a week doing Greater Changes work.
Oh,
And
wow.
like now we like I ain't gonna talk about the money and that, but like we like spaces and rooms that like we just weren't in. And a lot of it is like her expertise in the field and like being the professional that she is. So yeah, and then just being an amazing person outside the business, like her ability to juggle so much of like life's nonsense that are come and then like just be graceful through it all, like amazing.
Shout out
I
to
like
Tamara. I love
that. Oh my
this.
gosh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's nice because I think it's rare to hear men very comfortably and confidently give women, especially their women, like their flowers for just being great at life. So shout out to that. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, she's definitely dope. Tamara, I love to call her my pseudo therapist on Twitter because sometimes I'll be on Twitter like, man, sometimes I just feel like this. And Tamara will be like, it's okay. And I just appreciate her for like popping in and just like being like, you're good. You doing life good. You fine. You're good. I'm just like, okay, thank you. So yeah, shout out to her. She really is a phenomenal person and someone that I definitely admire. So Tamara, you were spotted being good up. Shout out to you. Deidre,
Hey,
who is your person?
my person being good up is one of my best friends. It's going to have to be Glennis because the day that we're recording this, my good sis just walked across on people's stage and she just turned her tassel. She graduated today. Congratulations, Glennis. You are the shit. You are who spotted being good up. And I especially want to highlight the fact that when she shared like her bomb ass graduation pics, because one thing she gonna always do is serve a look. Her caption was very specific to like whether it takes you 4 years or 40 years to graduate, it's your journey and you the shit. And so I think that was really dope. I think it was very inspirational. I'm so proud of you. Congratulations. Not only was my sis finishing up a degree that it took her forever to finish, she was also serving this fuck ass country, being deployed in the process multiple times and struggling with the fact that she was like having a long distance parenting with her son, who is the shit. She's fortunate enough to have a support system that makes it possible for her to do the job that she does, but she did that shit regardless. So yes, my person being good up is my good sis Glenesse David, also known as AbsoluteDoll on the social media places.
Shout out to Glennis. We are so proud of you. I think she mentioned working on her degree when she was on last season in a best friend
Yep.
episode. So
Yes,
we
she
are
was still in
so
school.
proud of you, Glennis.
You go, girl.
I feel
So
like
happy for her.
this is our occasion to stand up in your car, you know?
Yeah,
Like
honestly, you
you
remember
should
that?
do it.
Listen, one thing my girl gonna do is
Um,
start a trend. That standing up on a car trend was
yeah,
wild,
yeah,
but
I
I'm
think she
very
should.
happy for her.
She should with a
Yeah.
cap and gown. So congrats to you. My person being good up is also somebody from home. Actually two people who go by one name. West Gyul is my person or people spotted being good up. And it's because West Gyul is currently in the process of planning an event in Frederickstead. A lot of y'all have heard about Tart Wars. Me and Deidre have given our thoughts on the whole Tart Wars situation, but I think West Gyal has really found their niche in creating spaces and events for people to come together, for the community to come together and just have fun and just decompress and relax. And in addition to the Tatwar event that they're having, which I think it's on July 13th, they're also having Kidsville again, which last year they did it at the Crujan Festival Village. This year they're doing it in the Mildred Cummings Park. And they are going as far with this Kidsville as to like two of the first hours of the event are going to be specifically for kids who are neurodivergent, kids who have sensitivity to sound, kids who typically wouldn't be able to participate in these big community events because they might be overwhelmed or they might be overstimulated. So they're really like when she was talking to me about this event, like I was like, wow, like the thought that went into this, the fact that you are
Yeah.
creating spaces for kids that are not just pageants, are not just, you know, competition. Like there aren't a lot of
Yeah.
spaces like that for our kids anymore. So to see community members who are in our generation taking the time to do that and to remember that we are the adults now and it's our responsibility to look out for these children, whether or not they belong to us. Like we need to applaud West Gyul. Now, do I
Absolutely.
have some side eye for West Gyul because of these red man posts? Yes. We're gonna talk about that later. But when you're doing good, West Gyul. So shout out
Yeah.
to you for Tot Wars and for all of these things that you're doing for the community. Like this is a page that just kind of came out of nowhere, and you cannot look at a West Gyul platform and lie and say that they haven't done anything for the community. Like
Right.
they've really used the platform for good in many instances. So shout out to y'all. And if you're on St. Croix, definitely go to that event. And thank you, West Gyul, for always sharing good up posts, for you know, spreading our content to your followers, because sometimes you don't have to do that. We don't pay West Gyul to do that, and West Gyul will just
Right.
share our content. So I appreciate y'all. And yeah, that's my pausing / people spotted being good up because it's two of them. So yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's a good one. Shout out to West Gyul. We love
Yeah,
you.
we love you, West
We
Gyul.
love y'all, but I'm gonna say you because you know.
And
I think
with
I don't know.
that,
It's just such a big flex to know who West Gyul is.
yeah, I just want to say we still have that deal with them where when they decide to no longer be anonymous, which I don't know if I
We're
ever
gonna get
want
the
them to do
exclusive.
that,
I don't
but
want
yeah.
them to. Yeah, I think there are people who know, but
I like
this,
that people don't know.
I love that people don't know, and I love that the people who know are not exposing them. But if they ever do decide to go public with their identity, we've already gotten confirmation that it would be a Good Up exclusive.
It's a Good Up exclusive. So
I don't know. That just feels really, maybe it's because I'm a Scorpio rising. That just feels very like lit to me. Like we are gonna get access to that information before the rest of y'all.
it's just like I love being mysterious.
I really do.
All right. So the next segment that we have is the hills that we are dying on. So again, this is just our opinion that we feel steadfast in. Nobody ain't gonna change our mind. We have decided to plant ourselves on this hill. It's been fun doing this segment, I will say, this season, because sometimes I'll come on Twitter and everybody's like, yeah, I love Deidre Hill. I stand with her. Is on her hill. And sometimes I come on Twitter and people are like, what is wrong with you? So I like creating reactions. You know, it's been fun. With that being said, Tarik, do you have a hill that you're dying on this week?
Yeah. I think it's been a hill for me for a while, although like kind of keep it to myself a little bit. But I feel like if you are a person who could use or who uses your either financial capital or social capital to further oppress people in the Virgin Islands, like you reap what you sow, and what you get, you get. Because like that's violence, and like people respond to violence with violence, and whatever that looks like, it looks like.
Honestly, period. I love that Tarik came through with very little words, but a lot to say. Like he made that point so crystal clear, and he didn't even have to go on this very long, like he got straight to the point. And I think that's a very good hill. I think that's a very good hill.
And us in the Virgin Islands and abroad, it made me think of celebrities like Lizzo who have been, I think Lizzo has definitely been online sort of asking for empathy a lot in her content lately for what she's going through. And people have been like, yo, like, we get it. You're going through something. But at the same time, like, your fans have been asking you to say something because any other time you use a social justice warrior. But right now, you're very silent. So text smoke. Where you going to get smoke? I don't know.
Yeah.
You got a big platform. This is what you got.
Yeah.
So yeah, Deidre, why hell are you dying?
Baby, that adult man who had teenage girls undoing his hair, in my personal opinion, is a fucking groomer. And that's the hill I'm dying on. And I don't even think it's necessary to go into the depths of what makes him come off as a groomer. I think we have a smart enough audience to understand what a groomer is, but there is nothing appropriate about a group of teenage girls unbraiding an adult man's hair, especially when that adult man is their teacher. And if me or anybody in a leadership position at our workplace can risk or could face termination for our subordinates doing something like that for us, then what the fuck is the difference between students doing something like that for their teachers? If I'm at work and the team that I am leading is doing my personal grooming on the job, if I have any kind of a relationship that seems too personal with my staff, baby, HR is going to pull me into their motherfucker. Well, it's going to be a Zoom call because it's a big company, but either way, there's going to be repercussions. So I don't understand why there are not more people that are outraged by this adult man who is a teacher having such a close and inappropriate relationship with his students. And the thing that's really uncomfortable for me is the amount of women who are defending it and really being naive. I'm surprised at how naive people are in this discussion. It's actually very uncomfortable to watch because I see more women defending that man than men. And I expected men to be the ones that are like, oh, y'all are turning something into nothing, and or y'all are turning nothing into something. I really expected men to be, you know, in this state of delusion defending that man, but it's actually more women than men who are defending him. And I'm just going to say it. I think that's a big part of why so many predators get away with harming vulnerable people, especially children, because it's very easy for predators to pretend to be exactly what to pretend to be safe to be around, because that's usually what predators do, is they present themselves as these safe people that can be trusted, as these gentle people who care about the people that they're friggin' victimizing. And then the vulnerable people in the group, like women, for instance, fall for it and defend it and say, oh, it could never be this person. And that's exactly who it is. So all that rambling to say, that teacher is dead wrong, and I hope he does get fired.
I think he did get fired.
Apparently he hasn't been fired, but he's like on administrative leave.
Yeah.
So it's still up in the air, but he's not making the situation any better because he's still coming online, trying to defend himself, trying to prove that he's not a predator, and reading these children's personal messages to him about how much they miss him and how much of a bestie I don't know. I don't care. I refuse to believe that that man is anything other than a groomer, because that's exactly what grooming is. Literally and figuratively, but that's the hill I'm dying on. And yeah, my last word while I die on that hill gonna be that man is a groomer.
It's been an interesting conversation online regarding that clip. So for those of you who haven't seen it, because I recognize that some people aren't good up to be in our own wall, and bless you for not being that.
And I love that for y'all.
I wish I was you. But there basically was a video with what looked like either a junior high or a high school teacher, and he was explaining that apparently he had like a photo shoot and he needed to take out his braids. So he asked his students to take out his braids for him. And he explained that not only did he ask students in his class, but he also gave hall passes to other girls from other classes to come basically help him take his braids down. And while he's, you know, explaining this in a video, the girls are on camera unbraiding his hair while he's like at his desk working. But you can clearly see these girls like faces, they're on school property, they're in school uniform, like it was very obvious. And it sparked this whole debate about whether or not this was inappropriate. And it's been a very interesting conversation on boundaries and on the expected professionalism of teachers in that case, because I think the conversation went really quick into, and me and saying that I disagree with what you're saying, Deidre, but I think a lot of the conversation went straight to like is he a predator? Is he a groomer? Is he this? And what I didn't see people kind of talking enough about was the fact that a lot of teachers have been putting students in their content on TikTok, and you can see these people's faces and they're like, oh, well, what if they get permission from the parents? But at the end of the day, you are essentially exploiting minors to create content on TikTok.
Yep.
Point blank. So it really, to me, it matters that boundaries are respected and that minors aren't being harmed, obviously. But where I initially was like, in the very beginning was, why am I able to see these teenage girls' faces on the internet? Point blank period.
That's
If I was your
yeah.
boss, you would have get fired for that. I
So
wouldn't
that's the
even
thing.
need to
Number
know
one,
anything else. You would have get fired for
those
that.
kids, so I wholeheartedly agree with you. Those children should not even be able to be shown on his social media. I don't know how true this is, but apparently at the start of the school year, apparently the school that he works at is aware that he's a content creator, and him and the school have some sort of a setup to where any student that he's going to teach, their parents are sent home like release forms. And as a parent, I've had school when I've put Dylan in preschool and any school I've sent him to, if the school has a social media page, they send, or even not even just social media, but like the websites, one of the first things schools send you is like a permission slip, if you will, like a release form saying, hey, if your child ends up in any pictures, do you authorize the release of your child's face being shown in any of this content? But that's the school's social media, right? And the school's website. He had apparently, I don't know how true it is, apparently he got clearance from the school to send home release forms to the parents. And apparently his students' parents all signed releases giving permission for their children's faces to be shown. I think that's, again, irresponsible. I don't even, and it looks like a charter school. Regardless, I don't even understand why any school districts or anything are allowing teachers to use children. And to, even if you are sending home release forms, I do think there needs to be a hard line in the sand. If the institution itself has a system in place so that the institution is being given permission to post, that's one thing. But an individual teacher, I think that's a little, the line is too blurred and it's risky, especially some of the content he posts. Apparently on his personal social media, he posts content like shirtless with his tattoos out, and he has students who follow him and like are in the comments. Apparently some of the female students go back and forth about him in his comments. Like, it's a very inappropriate relationship. And then a video of his from 2 years ago surfaced of like a video that he stitched of a teenage girl who had posted something about only liking like alternative emo boys. He stitched the video lip syncing to like a very like emo alt song with like the emo filter, like pretty much
Like to
shooting his
present
shot,
himself. Yeah, shooting
to
his
present
shot.
himself as what she says she likes. And this was a 16-year-old girl, and it was very obvious that she was in a school bathroom. So it was, and you know, there's people who are like, oh, but he didn't know her age when he stitched the video. And you can tell a teenager. You can also tell what a high school bathroom looks like, a school bathroom in general looks like. So it's like y'all are doing gymnastics and y'all are doing going through hoops to try to absolve this man of his clearly inappropriate behavior. And I'm just not here for it. I don't want to hear the bullshit. I don't want to hear it. It's one thing if it was really just an innocent, like, them helping him with his braids and none of those other things came out. I can understand people being like, oh, maybe we're going too far. Maybe we're catastrophizing this. I don't know if I said that word correctly, but if it was just that one isolated incident of him really being in a pinch and his students helping him with his hair, I would be like, okay, maybe we need to figure out a neutral ground as a community. But he's getting hall passes for these girls. He's allowing these girls to be commenting. First of all, the fact that he hasn't blocked his students. Like, I wouldn't have my students following me on social media, especially if I'm posting, like, imagine me as a teacher posting like swimsuit content and teenage boys are commenting about how fine I am or whatever. What?
Yeah, I think there's definitely boundaries that he was responsible for setting that he just wasn't setting. And I think the expectation was that the community would respond with, what's the word I'm looking for? That we would assume good intent when the truth is when it comes to young girls, like, you have to think about all of that. You have to think about perception, but you also you have to, again, like I said earlier, think about your responsibilities as a teacher and how teenagers operate. Like, you are responsible for drawing a line. So Tarik, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on Deidre's hill before I share mine.
Yeah. So I don't know if I go as far as like the grooming perspective, but I definitely see like this horrible boundary setting that just wasn't there at all. It really is unprofessional. Plus, like, I had braids before, and taking out some plaits like that ain't nothing. That's like 10 minutes. Like, you don't need nobody to take out your hair like that. So yeah, it definitely inappropriate.
I was going to say that, like, for me, I was even like joking about time management wise. Like, as your boss, even if I had agreed to the content, even if they had do the photo really, all of that, I would have been like, why are you unbraiding your hair at work while these students still in your classroom? Like, that don't make
Exactly.
sense to me, but
Yeah, on a professional level, it's inappropriate. It's stealing company
yeah,
time when you really want to break down the actual technicalities.
yeah,
He's stealing company time, but he's also crossing a boundary between himself and the students that
yeah,
should have been established a long time ago. And it was a boundary that he was responsible for setting, not the children.
yeah,
A big part of why I just refuse to give him any grace, is because I don't know about y'all, but we all grew up in the same island. Hair braiding has always been a pretty intimate like thing. And I've seen people in relationships getting big broke down fight because man let other woman braid their hair. So that's where I'm like confused again, because I'm like, I've seen grown adults be beefing because this woman man had a next woman in his hair. And so I'm not understanding why we're not seeing that same inappropriateness between children and an adult. Like, why are these children? And granted, it's not like he was sitting between their legs, but
yeah,
again, I've seen adults have these kinds of fights. So why are we not having that same smoke for this man letting children do his hair? Like, there just has to be a hard line. Like,
yeah,
and you know, if it was a thing where, because I remember the cosmetology class at the technical school, right? The vocational school. If it was a thing where he went to like a cosmetology class, and I think it would be a little bit less awkward, right? Like, because this is a trade school and he's giving the girls a chance to like, you know, develop their skills or whatever. But you're in your science class or whatever. These girls all have their rat tail combs. You giving out hall passes. It was just weird to me. I thought it was inappropriate. I didn't like the way I felt watching that video,
I
watching these
feel you.
girls surrounding this adult man. It felt weird. I didn't like it. And I don't care if it's coming off as a projection. He's closer in age to them than their parents. So even that, we have to acknowledge, like, we recognize that there are inappropriate relationships already outside of the school between men in their 20s and teenage girls. He's in a very sensitive position, and I think he needs to be more protective of his job and those children. Like, we already know that these kinds of inappropriate lines get crossed, like between teachers and students all the time. And so I think as a teacher, and this is for men and women, not just for men, because I have the same smoke for female teachers. Let me also make that clear for people who are going to try to come and say, oh, she's only acting like that because it's a man. No. If you're a teacher, there should be a hard line between you and the children, period. But if you're a teacher who's close in age with those children, there's a 10 or less year age gap between you and those children. I think you should take even more steps to prevent exactly what's happening right now. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna
no.
leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think there's a conversation to be had in the community about recognizing when situations could become like harmful, inappropriate. I think a lot of times when it comes to predators in our community, sometimes we realize it when it's too late and we don't
Late.
set the boundaries when they need to be set. So let's say, even if this is a situation where what if we give this person the benefit of the doubt, whatever, and this person wasn't, but what if he was? And we looked at this and was like, there's no problem with it. And we bypass some boundaries that should have been set between this adult and these children as the community. And then we allowed harm to happen because we didn't recognize when a situation could become harmful. But yeah, I think that's a good hill. I'm glad you bring it up because I was like, where's a good fit for this topic on the podcast? But it's
And
been
I
a
want
big
to add
topic on social media.
one last thing. I'm so sorry, but this is the thing that really like was the nail in the coffin. I think because he's being so adamant about being so defending himself, because of the lengths he's going to try to quote defend himself, it makes him look more guilty. Because if it was really as innocent as he's saying, I think he would have been more open to understanding perspectives outside of his own. Like, if it was really as innocent as he's saying, I think he would have been like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about it like that. Like, I think he would have been like a little bit more receptive to people's like concern, but instead he's like going harder. And even when he posted the video, he said something, the caption said like, oh, I'm stirring the pot right now or something like that. Apparently, he sent the video to a group chat of other teachers and they were like, I don't know, this is not it. And he posted it online anyway. Like, I think he's being antagonistic. I think he's being I I think he's being antagonistic and I think he's being pretty arrogant about this situation and I don't trust it. And I think he's a groomer. And I don't care how extreme that makes me sound. I won't be surprised if a few years from now we find out that he's in a relationship with one of his students.
Lord Jesus. That is Deetra's Hill.
That's my hill. And don't cut this part out, Nita.
Why you guys say it like that?
Because you too nice sometimes.
No, I cut certain things because I time in, Miss Ma'am. Okay.
Okay. This is one thing. Don't cut this part out. You can cut out anything else. Because
No,
that man, I don't know. I don't trust it. I'm gonna let it go. I'm done.
All right, that is Deetra's Hill, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna share my hair real quick before we get into the main topic. And I have to add context to this. So you guys know when you drive in, especially in the States, and you see a F-150 with American flag in the back, and there's nothing inherently racist I need to word this carefully because there is something inherently racist about the American flag. But the American flag, to many people, is not necessarily a symbol of racism. But for the time period that we're in now, when you see an American flag, your mind will just go racist. Like, okay, that's the context I'm establishing here. Sometimes when I hear steel pan music at like a beach bar or an airport, there's nothing racist about a steel pan. A steel pan is a beautiful instrument. It's very important to the culture. Shout out to it. They originate in Trinidad, right? Shout out to the Trinis. I respect the steel pan as an instrument. But when I don't walk into an island establishment, specifically in the Virgin Islands, where our cultural music is not necessarily steel pan, and I hear steel pan, it'll feel racist to me. And I don't know how to really explain that. It feels like I'm being stereotyped. It feels like when I walk in, the white people expecting me to start dancing. I don't know. And I feel like they'll be like, oh, steel pan, like they'll love it. And it'll feel racist to me. I don't know where to go from that. That's just a thought I had.
Do the steel pan shola shimmy again.
It's like when you go to a beach bar and they're playing like reggae, but it's like very generic reggae. It'll feel racist to me. If I went, it's like getting in an Uber and the Uber start playing hip hop.
That'll happen to me a lot, and I get so offended.
And it's happened to me before.
Do that.
I've had an Uber driver turn to salsa, and I'm just like, so that's just the hill I dying on. That like, there's nothing wrong with reggae music. There's nothing wrong with steel pan. You pull Rising Stars trailer in front of me right now. It's a party. But if I walk in Rainbow, it's Rainbow usually Rainbow don't play whatever. But if I walk in like a beach bar like that, and I hear steel pan and there's just tourists around me, I don't just feel like I.
Do you think that they're doing that commercialized tourist thing, like trying to come off as tropical as possible because that's what the tourists expect?
To me.
Okay.
What
that
do
makes
they call
sense.
it?
Because at first I was like, girl.
In the movie Get Out, when she stirred the tea and he goes, so what did they call it where he goes? The
sunken place.
The sunken place. That's what it feels like. You know, that's just my
like Sebastian.
Yes.
Like that generic Caribbean accent.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's making sense. Because at first, I'm not gonna lie. At first, I was confused, but I get it now. I get what you're saying.
And Sebastian is a good example because in the New Little Mermaid, there's an island scene, and when they go to like this scene of like this fish market where all the islanders are, what you don't hear, steel pan.
Damn.
Steel pan is like the generic. Oh, they're islanders. Fling a steel pan on it. It's kind of like when you want to celebrate Hawaiians and you just throw like the little lays out, but you have no idea. Like it's like the generic multicolor lei that look like it feels racist to me. But that's the hill I dying on, and don't play steel pan in my beach bar. Unless it's legitimate steel pan.
If I go to a beach bar, I just want to hear Adamo. Like if I go back home, I want to hear local artists. I want to hear Monet's sexy ass. I want to hear like
artists. Play some Stanley. Like play something.
You know what that makes me think
to
of?
The local culture. And if the local culture is steel pan, play steel pan. But that's not. I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying because it's kind of like when you could go to any island in the Caribbean and the souvenir shops are going to have the same
The
coffee
same.
mug that has the same exact picture and the name of the island is what's different. Like it's
Mhm.
not going to be actual images of that specific island. It's just going to be very generic,
Yep.
you know, illustrations of like the beach and flowers
And let me add to
flowers that
that,
aren't even like native to that land.
because you just wake up something inside of me. If I go into your gift shop on an island and you have any sort of depiction of a Rasta man in ice gold and green with blunt in his mouth, you might be racist. You probably
Not
are
might be.
racist because
Yeah.
the caricature and they'll always have like blown up features. Like if
Hmm.
you racist,
And if you selling those hats with the fake locks
you
hanging off the
racist,
bottom, baby,
you
no, we
racist.
talking. Okay, yeah, period.
Yeah,
I
I
come in
just
over. I come in
something
over.
about that just the I will. So what stirred this is I was watching a movie the other day and they went to an
Mhm.
island. They didn't even name the island. It was insert island here and just steel pan. And I was just like, why is it steel pan every time? It's just it'll drive me crazy. But whatever. The hell I die now. With that,
Okay, it's
we've
a
talked
valid
about
hill.
a range of topics so far, but we're gonna get into the main episode. So Tarik is here for a reason. And he's
Yeah.
here because I wanted someone who is familiar with the subject of trauma, specifically as it relates to therapy. But I also wanted this to come from the mouth of a Virgin Islander because I think it's important for us to talk about mental health, but also as it relates to our culture and the experiences that we have as Virgin Islanders. And I think nobody really does that quite as well as Greater Changes. So Tarik is here for a reason. And with that being said, I gonna start with a first question for you, which is what is trauma? When we talk about trauma a lot, it's a word that's often used, especially in social media spaces now, but what actually is trauma?
So trauma is the emotional response to like a scary event. I think usually would have used trauma as like the thing that happens, but trauma is the response to it. So if your response, like your traumatic response might be like to fight or to freeze or to fawn. I think that's one of the ones that hasn't been like discussed a whole lot in the last like decade or so. But the fawn response, the fawn traumatic response is like um, when we talk about traumatic responses, like those are some of the things I would mean.
I think that's so important to note, because I think a lot of times people think that the trauma is the thing that happened, and they like describe it as this thing like my trauma. Um, so I've always wanted to like get clearer about the definition of it. So it's the response. So with that being said, is it safe to say that anyone can experience trauma and pretty much anything can cause trauma?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like um, you could experience the same thing and that thing be traumatic to one person, but not to the other. So yeah, trauma is like very nuanced and yeah, very nuanced.
So, what are some ways that trauma shows up that we might not expect or notice? So Tarik, you could go first, but Deidre, I would also like us to talk about maybe ways that we've had traumatic responses. You don't have to talk about like what caused the response, but if trauma has shown up for you in a way you didn't expect, what did that look like?
Like there isn't one way that trauma shows up. Sometimes trauma can be like I won't walk down this street because a dog chased me down this street 10 years ago. Trauma, like for me, my like from the beginning of hurricane season all the way to the end, like I become a meteorologist and I am on the National Hurricane Center every single day, and I am looking at the systems that might develop. I am outside in my yard making sure there's no, I mean, granted, some of these things are like taking precautions, right? To make sure that like I'm aware of what's going on and is there's no like debris in my yard that will fly all over the place if there is a hurricane. Um, but a lot of it is like this anxious thing that's going on for like the entire hurricane season. One of the ways that we don't talk about trauma showing up in like its physical manifestation is diabetes. Um, Trauma, and whenever you deal with any kind of stress, it produces cortisol in your body. Um, Cortisol is also used in order to push cortisol, you use glucose. So the more glucose that like you're pumping out into your body, like that leads to like the body's inability to regulate its glucose output. So like trauma shows up as diabetes, it shows up as high cholesterol, it shows up as cancer, which also happens to be some of the leading causes of death in the Caribbean. So like there's like a direct correlation between these things.
I would have never even
Yeah.
like I knew that like stress and stuff was a correlation, but I didn't realize it was that deep. Like, holy shit.
Especially in the Caribbean, like when you think about how frequently we experience environmental disaster and
Mm-hmm.
how frequently we experience trauma in terms of like violence per capita and just like all of these things that are not necessarily unique to the Caribbean, but something we experience frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thinking about like the causes of death in court, like that, yeah, that's
It makes a lot. And I'm one of those people who was misusing the word because I always thought that trauma was the noun, right? Like the thing. And I thought that like the response, I didn't realize that trauma was the response to the thing. I thought the thing was the trauma, like the traumatic event, if you will. So that's like, so now I'm trying to understand how to like articulate because I feel like everybody experiences trauma at some point. It's just going to look different. And like Tarik said, for some people, some things that might seem traumatic probably is like nothing to somebody else. So like okay, a good example, I guess, not so much mine per se, but like I would say that Dylan has had a relatively I would say easy life, right? Like he has parents who love him. He has a great community. He's been shielded from things that could cause him harm. But a couple of years ago, I had gotten injured. I had like a really bad workout injury that hospitalized me. And he recently shared with me that it traumatized him, like me having to go to the hospital and him seeing me in excruciating pain and seeing the doctors take too long to help me because I was in the emergency room for hours before I actually saw, like before I even got triaged. And Dylan was like maybe 7 at the time. And I just learned how traumatic that was for him. So even like now it makes sense to me, like when he knows I'm going to the gym, he tends to get a little anxious and every time he knows I'm at the gym, he like texts me like, are you almost home? Like, and now I'm realizing it's because he's scared that I'm gonna hurt myself again at the gym. Because I notice usually when he texts me to check on me and ask me if I'm almost home, it's usually like if the sun has already gone down and if I'm not home as early as he thought I would be home. I always thought it was just in general, but now I'm realizing like, no, it's usually when he knows I've been at the gym. So he's probably sitting at home anxious as hell, thinking like, oh my God, it's nighttime and she's still not home yet. Maybe she hurt herself. And for other kids, like I don't know that I would have been traumatized by something like that, but obviously he was. So that's kind of fascinating stuff. And it kind of gives me a new perspective because when I hear trauma, I think of like a terrible car crash. I think of assault. I think of like, your house catching fire. But I even learned a few years in therapy that Hurricane Maria traumatized the fuck out of me. So I'm realizing that there's so many more factors at play.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially as it relates to the hurricanes. So I was in Houston when the hurricanes happened in the Virgin Islands, and something that traumatized me in that process that I didn't realize is when I call my sisters or my mother and they don't answer the phone, I automatically start kind of going through the like, what's happening? Is everybody okay? Like, because not being able to reach my mother for as long as I couldn't reach her, like traumatized me. And she was fine. Nothing major happened. She wasn't injured. Like nobody passed away, thankfully. But the thought of that, like the fear of it is actually what ended up causing the trauma. So sometimes I'll call people, like I'll call my husband, and if they don't answer the phone right away, I kind of go into this like doom scroll almost of like all the bad things that could possibly be happening to them right now without me knowing where they are.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how trauma shows up. For me, like I've talked about being in a major car accident before and going through a lot of therapy to like deal with. I actually was diagnosed with PTSD because of it. And even to this day where like I'm driving again, I'm mostly normal in cars. I noticed that if somebody offers to drive versus me driving, I go instantly offer to drive. Like, even if I'm not scared, even if I'm not jumpy in cars, like I go automatically be like, yeah, no, I would prefer to drive. Like I would rather be in control because that's like my fear is somebody else driving and losing control and whatever. So yeah, it shows up in a number of different ways. Something I wanted to highlight from my own personal therapy journey is that sometimes when you become settled, trauma can show up that you didn't know was like something that actually bothers you. I recently went back into therapy and I remember telling my therapist, like, there are all these things that are coming up that I feel fearful about or anxious about, or suddenly I don't like certain things. And like, I feel completely different. And when we dove deeper, we realized that like, sometimes you experience trauma, you kind of shut down, like you were talking about earlier, Tarik, like you freeze or you process it, you survive essentially in the moment. But then when you become settled and when you feel safe, it's almost like a file cabinet opening and your brain will kind of start to be like, okay, now that you cooling, let's talk about this. I was mind blown. I was also very pissed off about it, but that blew my mind, how trauma could kind of come back on its own timing. It was super interesting.
Yeah, trauma to just do what I want. Like when I was saying that like we're greater. I mean, I guess I said it kind of jokingly, but like greater changes started off with like $35 a week. But like that was also like financially the most unstable time in my life. So like going to the store and buying something, like I had to know exactly what this, because if it's more than $5, like I will not be able to afford it. So even today, like as being more stable, when I go to cash out something, like I am nervous that like the card will say declined. Like if I go to any store and the card don't read the first time, I am going through the app. I'm caught, hey, Tamara, how come the card ain't working? What's going on? Like I'm like panicky because like it's just a response from like being in poverty for like a really long time.
Mm. How would you what Hayes I brought up of like being like just chilling, everything's fine, and then your trauma just suddenly just popping in like, hey girl, want to chat? How would you recommend somebody manage that? Because I've had that experience too where I will be having a normal day, everything's fine, and I suddenly feel really bad. And then I'm having like and I guess triggers, I don't know if this is the word, but I'm suddenly having flashbacks of like a really fucked up thing that I was experiencing like 10, 12, 10, 15 years ago. And I'm like, why am I even thinking about this? Like, I've already moved past this. I've survived it. I've escaped it. Why is this on my mind? How would you recommend somebody process that and deal with it?
So I think the clinical answer that I want to give is that usually the same skills that you developed in managing whatever traumatic responses for or whatever symptoms like first was coming up are usually applicable to like this next set of symptoms. So whether it was like some like tapping or whatever other somatic technique, or if it was like deep breathing, if it was journaling, whatever skill that you've had, like is usually applicable. I'd also recommend like going back to therapy and being like, yo, like, so some stuff came up. I want to see, maybe not, I want to know what it's about, but how else to manage it. So that's my clinical answer, right? The other part is this is where there's so much, like when Tamara and I have conversations about trauma, like we get stuck here because there's this idea of like post trauma, like this is the things after the trauma. But what happens when the thing that was the initial traumatic experience, like there's reminders of it like all around. So if you are working in like a predominantly white space and always face microaggressions, and then you reacted to one of them and you got fired, and now in this next job that you have, like you have these microaggressions all the time, it's like, well, I know I can't respond in the way I just did because I got fired the last time. I have to like continuously like navigate these things. When I first started doing trauma work, a lot of it was like you're gonna go through a trauma narrative and you're gonna write these things down, and at some point I was like, yo, like I can't keep playing my clients through this, like
Mm.
to constantly go over whatever the traumatic experience was. Um, and then I kind of realized like that part clinically is only necessary if you having flashbacks. If a person isn't having flashbacks, like generally there's no need to like keep on going over the trauma.
Mhm.
But we look at like healing, and I think this was one of the other questions you mentioned, like healing as being able to regulate yourself when these traumatic these symptoms come up. So like
Mm.
I feel anxious, I feel I don't know, you're not gonna regulate it. Your palms being sweaty, but like I feel panicky, my heart's beating. Well, I'm gonna use my deep breathing to calm down. But what happens when you live in a world where these things are constantly
Mm.
happening? Like for me, it's like I don't know, it's not I feel like it's not enough to just like say, okay, well, you're gonna breathe your way through this. Like there's something about that that's like, and that's like one of the things with trauma work that we just like get stuck on so much.
Yeah, I glad that you said that because I remember a very frustrating moment I had in therapy where obviously went through this major car accident, processed it. Some years later, maybe like 6 or 7 years later, I ended up getting a fender bender. I got rear-ended. And my response to the fender bender was almost more intense for me than my process in the first accident. And I remember being in therapy. This was a former therapist, and her kind of making those recommendations. Like, when you're in the car, we were doing CBT. So she was going through that, like, and that's cognitive behavioral therapy for those of you who don't know what that is. So she was kind of having me think about my thought process very heavily and like, where do you go when you start to panic? Like, what is causing you? Like, all of that stuff. And I get so frustrated because I was like, you cannot guarantee me that another car tomorrow ain't gonna come out of nowhere and hit me again. So
Mhm.
what do I do? Like I could deep breathe all day, but the reality in my mind is that there are cars everywhere. I am going to get in another like so I know she didn't have all the answers, but I remember feeling that frustration of like I could do all the somatic practice in the wall, but when it comes to the reality of like that's a good example, microaggressions. Every job that I go to as a non-white person, I am going to probably experience that. People who've been in accidents, cars are everywhere. So like, how do we get to a place where it's the somatic practices or like I don't know the answer. Like obviously not qualified, but I do remember feeling like exasperated with it of like I could only do so much deep breathing.
The science to it, like when I first started explaining deep breathing, my clients would look at me like, "Hey, man, like, what are you telling me?" But like when you explain, like, look, like the deep breathing actually like turns on the areas of the brain that helps you think and be creative and problem solve. Like but at the same time, it's like, how do I problem solve my way out of these microaggressions? Yeah, for the clients who I've worked with, that like sexual assault is a traumatic experience. Like, how do I problem solve my way out of these constant reminders of being catcalled every time I go to the gas station? Right? Like, there's only so much regulation that you can do. And I think at some point there's just like you kind of like accept like this is the reality of it. And I even like this is like it's so weird because like you accept that like there's a like you said like there's a chance that like a car come out of nowhere because that's life, and there's a chance that this person calls me when I go to the gas station, and there's a chance that all these other traumatic things happen. And I think there's just like how do you I guess that's the path of life. Like you be okay with enjoying as much of life as possible, knowing that these things are possibilities. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I still don't feel like it's good enough, but like I think that's just where we are right now.
Yeah. Do you guys do therapy and coaching or just therapy?
Just therapy.
Just therapy? Because I know my old therapist, she had to help me. I don't know if process is the correct word, but one of the things that she and I worked through was like, um, you know, I guess overcoming like sexual assault, right? And like abuse and all kinds of shit like that. And I feel like deep breathing was one of the things, but also like she spent a lot of time helping me to be more in the present, right? So we obviously discussed what happened in the past, but she helped me to navigate like triggers, right? Like this thing that reminds me of the event. And then she gave me certain tools of being like, essentially going through like a checklist of what's happening in this very moment. Like, yeah, a specific smell reminded me of an event, or a specific sound or whatever reminded me. But then she kind of would help me. I remember being on calls with her and her having to do this. She would bring me back to this moment right now. So she would say, "Hey, Deidre, what's going on right now?" And I would tell her. And she would be like, "Is that person here right now?" And I would be like, "No." She's like, "Have you spoken?" So maybe I think that's definitely one of the things that helped me. And that's how I tend to, when I get certain triggers, that's what helps me come back to reminding myself like that everything's okay. So even like, I know some people get really irritated when like therapists say like everything's okay, but that's their way of bringing you back to the present moment as opposed to the past situation. And it's not invalidating what happened in the past. It's reminding you that you're here now, you're okay now. And then of course the deep breathing comes into play. But I think those checklists that she used to give me definitely helped a lot. And even one of the things that I struggled with when I was working with her was I would not let new people into my life at all. Like when I tell y'all, I was so like guarded. I would not let anybody in, especially men. And she would have to remind me, like, not everybody you meet is going to be like the people who've harmed you in the past. She would have to constantly remind me, this person is not that person. She used to say things like that a lot. Like, let's say Jack is the person who assaulted me and Bob is who's trying to get to know me. She would be like, Bob is not Jack. Jack assaulted you. Bob never did anything to you. And then she would say, what's happening is you're having a hard time trusting people because you're scared that you might be choosing the wrong people to let around you. So, so that when she first told me that, I was offended by it. But looking like in retrospect, she was right. I felt like it was safer to just not let anybody around than to possibly let somebody who could be harmful around. But she helped me with things like that, and that was helpful. But I think she did a lot of goal setting, which I feel like doesn't necessarily come with therapy. So I don't know if maybe she kind of was doing coaching as well, because apparently that's the difference between coaching and therapy, is like the goal setting aspect. But I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, I think with I think in my first sessions, whenever I talk with a client, like I do ask them like, what goals do you want to set? And like how do we work together to reach those goals? Sometimes like the client has no idea like what the goals are outside of like, I just want to feel better, whatever better is. And then maybe the first few sessions is like narrowing down what better looks like, so we have a more defined goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have like the coaching aspect, I think, is a slippery slope sometimes, because you don't really need a license to be a coach. And I feel like there's like so much room for people to kind of like slip in who like they don't necessarily want to do the work to like be licensed. And then there's and then there's like no one like regulating like that part of it. Now that's not everybody. Some people like they have like this license and experience, but more people are like accepting of like coaching than they want to go to a therapist. And sometimes people pay like premiums for coaches, like $5,000-6,000 session for a coach. So
It's
it's like,
crazy to me. You know what's funny? I'm a licensed, like I'm a certified life coach, and I don't really talk about it because of how like murky the coaching space is. Like I went through the process of getting certified, and even after the certification, I feel uncomfortable like become like soliciting like clients, if you will, because I would prefer if people go to therapy. Like I
no,
find that like
I
I
think
always
coaching has its place for sure. Like, I
it
think
does
coaching
have
has its
its
place for sure.
place. Yeah, but I think a lot of people, and I've seen it with people who've tried to work with me, is a lot of people are afraid of therapy. A lot of people think that going to therapy makes it that something's wrong with them, or that they're quote crazy. And so they would prefer to go to a coach with things that I feel like a therapist should be helping them with. And so I find myself redirecting clients like, I don't mind working with you, but I think that there are certain things that I'm not qualified to support you with that I think a therapist is a better fit for. Like, and I don't know that a lot of coaches are doing that, because some people, I'll be honest, some people just say they're good at something and call themselves a coach, and they're like, I'm a coach, come to me. And then I feel like it causes more trauma for some people, because I've heard some horror stories about people with coaches. So
Yeah,
that's why
we
I'm like,
had.
there's a lot of value in it for sure, but
Mhm.
I think that some coaches don't do their part to usher people in the direction they should be going, because there's some things coaches are just not qualified to support people with.
Yeah, we did an episode called Scams and Vibrations on life coaching and just what we thought about like motivational speakers. And I think a sign of a good coach would be somebody who has the ability to say when they're not qualified and when a therapist is more suited to support
Yeah.
somebody with an issue. Because like you said, it can be a slippery slope. And I think sometimes people are something I thought the goals conversation was interesting. And sorry to kind of ramble. I remember being one of those people who could not identify goals. And
Mm,
I was at a place, and this is like a couple of months ago, like I just went back to therapy, where I was telling my therapist, like, all of my friends have these like career goals and things they want to do and things they're looking forward to. And I'm in a place in my life where there is nothing I want to do. There is nothing I'm looking forward to. Like I
mm,
feel like bleh, like I feel stuck. And that was actually trauma that I needed to process in
mhm.
Arab, because so something that I identified was that I wasn't looking forward to the rest of my life because I had this like doom feeling that I was going to die all the time. So I didn't want to
Oh,
make plans because I thought I had the assumption that I was going to die. So
yeah.
sometimes like you'll go to a coach and be like, well, I having trouble setting goals, but it might be, and this is not me trying to diagnose anybody, but like it might be an underlying thing that you actually
Mm-hmm.
need to process with a therapist first
Mm-hmm.
before a coach
Yep.
can actually help you. And I've had coaches,
Yes.
like career coaches, literally try to psychoanalyze me and me be like, girl, I have a therapist for that. You are not Leslie. Like, back up. You don't
Hello.
be like that.
She said you are not
You are
Leslie.
not
No,
Leslie.
no facts. First of all, shout out to Leslie. I think
Yeah,
it's
shout out to
crazy
Leslie.
that
I
you
love
felt
her.
like you didn't have goals when you have a whole live event coming up that you're excited about.
I gonna be real
I'm
with you,
just,
Deidre. Even a live event, there you remember like well when we initially started planning it, I would always say like I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. So I gonna just like let you
oh, that's
take con
why.
it was because like I was so like I can't plan nothing, I can't do this, I can't do that, and I feel like I'm getting to a place now where like I can look
Mhm.
forward to things, which is awesome. But again,
Yeah.
therapy, like
I'm really
my
sorry to hear
therapist helped
that.
with
I had
that.
no idea. I'm sorry.
Listen,
Shit.
your brain will be wilding sometimes, and that again, that was just something that like was new. It came up after years of me being like, I have goals and I have plans and I look forward to
Mhm.
things, and all of a sudden the pandemic happened. Whew. Can we talk about the pandemic
Can we?
being
I was
traumatic?
just about to say, like, Tarik, I want you to take over, because I really want us to discuss the pandemic and the effects that it had on people. Um, please, like, because that was so traumatic. And granted, all of us who survived it, like, we should be grateful to have survived it, but that shit was still traumatic as fuck. Can you please, like,
Yeah, we all
touch on
experienced
that?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's like the collective trauma of the pandemic where like um especially if like you were here. I left like right before like everything shut down and everything. But not being able to like live life in the way that you know life to be.
Hmm.
And then this feeling of things being dangerous and like even when things have calmed down, and I think calmed down relatively, the pandemic, the COVID is still out there, but like this idea that like it could come back. And what we know about this system is that it will not shut down again because the economic consequences were just too great. And
Yeah.
it just can't. So we know that the next time around, like people are gonna die because like if you have to put human life next to capital, like capital can always win just because that's what
Yeah.
the system is. But it was like a very terrifying experience to even like I see like my mom, she's always like a super clean person. Super like I won't touch this because germs or whatever. And like seeing that like intensify. I remember the first time I saw her, um, I guess 2021 or so, 22, like she flew up to Florida and she had like this spray bottle and it wasn't like alcohol, it was like like some kind of hurricane proof rum or something. And like she would just like spray the air. Like she opened the door and like and she like to make the noise too. Like so if I sick now and I come around, she ugh, yuck, nasty, gross, get away.
Oh
And
my
like she'd
God.
say jokingly, but like I know a part of it is like I don't want to be sick, and
Hmm.
then seeing like so much people just die. Like you said, like the people who made it through, like we feel lucky, but like so many people didn't, so
Exactly.
like there's having to mourn the loss of this person, but also be angry at the fact that like the things that were supposed to be in place to keep us alive, like largely they just weren't in a lot of
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a wild time, and like witnessing people die at like witnessing the amount of people who were dying at a time is where things are like, that was traumatic, and then the people who actually lost loved ones and people close to them, combine that with like one of my coworkers died like I don't and that's the thing, he pretty much died from COVID because he caught COVID, and while he was recovering he died, so it was like the
Mm.
residual effects, and it was like getting a text message from your boss like, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up that such and such passed away, like, and it's like, wait, this happened so fast, and where's his family, how's everybody doing, like that was happening to so many people,
And
and
it
like
was
families were just,
fast.
it was fast, that
Mhm.
was the thing, it was just so quick. And I don't think, which I'm not surprised, like, come on, it's our government. I don't think there was anything set up to help people recover from that. Like, I think even as we kind of reopen the world, I think everybody was more focused on getting back to normal, or
Normal.
getting
Yeah.
getting back to what life was like pre-pandemic. And I don't think there was much investment in helping people to process it, right?
Yeah.
A lot of children lost 2 years of school and social interaction, and something that we had a chance to have. But like right now, teachers are on the internet complaining about children not being able to read and stuff, and they're blaming parents. A big part of that is the fact that they were e-learning for like a school year and a half. Like those things are not being factored in. And it's interesting, and I'm interested to know like what's going to happen, like what are we going to do as a collective to try to help to remedy it, right? Because I think that these effects are going to go on for much longer than we're being honest about. Like right now, for some people we could say, oh, things feel like it's back to normal. It's really not. Like it's
No.
really not. um so have you had clients, or do you have clients who are recovering from the trauma of the pandemic?
I don't know if it's like if that would be the specific thing. I've definitely worked with clients who like they've lost people during COVID. They had COVID and they came like really close to dying. One of the things that was like really terrifying for me, like doing the work and then like Tamara and I got COVID at the same time. So like we were, I mean, there was a few times where like we look at each other and it's like, yo, like we need to start like writing down like what it is that we want, like if we do pass, because like it was really, really bad. Um it's just and then like having to so recovering and then or even going into being sick after hearing people talk about losing their loved ones to
Yeah.
COVID, it was like, what is going on? Um, but a lot of times, like at least right now, most of the issues that I deal with in the office, or I guess I'm doing telehealth, is some kind of trauma. Very rarely is it related to just COVID.
Hmm.
Um, it's actually one of the things that's like another point where we get stuck in doing trauma work. When you talk about like post-traumatic,
Mm.
for most people of color or any like marginalized group, there is no pre-trauma for us, right? There's like and if you talk about like being from the Caribbean, being in the Virgin Islands, being black, being queer, being disabled, or there's so many things that there isn't a pre-trauma for so many marginalized groups. And then what we know about trauma, you don't necessarily have to experience to experience the traumatic thing. Like there's so many studies that have shown that somebody's great grandparents could experience something, and that trauma, that the response be passed down through DNA, you know, so like,
Epigenetics.
yeah, like somebody who, like, I think about the all the children in Palestine, right? Like they're growing up in this place where like there's bombings and there's this
Hmm.
fear that you may not see tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
what happens for the ones that do survive, because what's going on over there is
Yeah.
tragedy. And we know that a lot of them ain't gonna survive. What happens to their grandchildren, and like
Yeah.
what's transmitted through that, and like the cost of that, like we kind of see like the thing that's happening now, and like you don't really get to hold anybody accountable for the things that may happen 2 or 3 generations if
Hmm.
later, you know.
Can I ask you something? Because this is my first time ever hearing pre-trauma. What would be an example of pre-trauma?
Well, so when I say pre-trauma, I mean like like a baseline where like there's nothing traumatic happening,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and for a lot of us that just doesn't exist.
Got it.
And even
Okay.
if it's like even if you don't want to look far back as like slavery or anything, but
Hmm.
like for us who's gone through a hurricane, like
Hmm.
my startle response now is much more exaggerated than it was before. There's a good chance that offspring that I have and their offspring may have like a more exaggerated startle response because of that traumatic experience. They may
Hmm.
be more likely, and there's a reason why people of color have they're more likely to have diabetes or high
Hmm.
cholesterol, not just because of like choices, but like these things are transmitted
Mm-hmm.
Got
epigenetically.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's super interesting. And I think something that we've talked about, I know for sure on Twitter, but maybe not necessarily on a podcast, is how community violence results in trauma that we usually never actually talk about. How we are
Mm.
so used to witnessing violence as a community. And I think you know touched on it with what the kids in Palestine are experiencing, how they're at very young ages and have always lived in an occupied state. They've always lived around violence. So like if the violence is increasing now, but that has always been the reality. Um, I remember going home and New Year's Eve we stayed in. And y'all know what happened as soon as the clock struck
Oh
12 in the Virgin
gosh.
Islands. And they start
Yeah.
shooting. And I remember telling Steven, and it's the weirdest, most like crazy thing to say, I know, but I said I almost missed it. And he was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I almost missed how when it'll be quiet, sometimes you don't hear gunshots because sometimes when I'm in the States and it's too quiet, I'll be waiting for the gunshots and it'll
Oh
never
wow.
happen." So it was almost relieving to hear what my brain will be wanting to expecting to hear when I went home.
Hmm.
Or
Mm.
how in the States sometimes people will be about to fight and sometimes they'll just fight. And not to say there's no gun violence in the States, there is. But home, when a fight will happen, I don't instantly go into like I have to protect myself because somebody gonna start shooting, right? So it's the things that we grew up witnessing. I never saw as traumatic until I went to the States and saw how I was kind of prepping myself for violence in situations where violence wasn't, not to say fighting isn't violence, but where the type of violence I was expecting wasn't happening.
Hmm.
And I think as a community, sometimes we're like, oh, is the kids and is this is the cause, but we don't realize that like
It's a
these kids are
community.
being raised by people who experience traumatic violence, who were raised by people who experience traumatic violence. Like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is a community-wide issue that, like you said, has been passed down generationally, and like we are all responding to trauma. Like
Mhm.
that's how we grew up.
Yeah. It's
So
true.
Yeah.
something else I wanted to touch on, and again, I don't have the answer to anything, but something that I've been thinking about is the part that community plays in how we are going to be able to not necessarily heal from trauma, but create spaces for ourselves where we don't necessarily always have to be like on guard from traumatic experiences. Um, I'm currently in a group and it's an experimental group of all women of color who work in philanthropy. I work at a foundation, so that's the industry that I walk in, who have experienced racism and microaggressions at work. And this group is us meeting every 2 weeks to learn how to practice somatics, to talk about how white supremacy shows up in our lives, and to like basically process our experiences that we've had at work together. But a part of it is also for this group to become like a support group, like a community for each other, because many of us still work in the same industry. So to kind of use each other as like a community, like to depend on if we're going to like stay in the same space, because we're going to continue experiencing these things. So how do we show up like in community for each other in order to like deal, like to deal with it better? So being in a group has made me think about like home, like how are we as a community showing up for each other to deal with the trauma that we're all experiencing? Or how could we? Or like what does community look like, knowing that white people or white supremacy or the capitalism and all the other stuff that we're dealing with isn't going to change?
So there's actually one of the stuff that like me and Biko to talk about like extensively. Like what does it look like to build the systems that we need to take care of us? I think first there's like a need to acknowledge that like Virgin Islanders have always created spaces that we need to take care of ourselves. Um, Before there was a Eurocentric healthcare system, there was an indigenous healthcare system that took care of us. Um, if so, I think that's the first thing. Like we have to acknowledge that we have the capacity to do it.
Yes.
I think largely the other piece is like rarely do we do we look at the larger system. We look at the symptoms and we try to address those things. Um, I think it's such a nuance, and there isn't, I don't think right now there's like a solid answer, like this is what we do for sure. But I think being able to identify like what are the symptoms, and how do we strategically address the people who maintain the things that lead to those symptoms. So being able to do things like power mapping and being able to identify like where are the sources, like where's the money that hold this thing up. You had mentioned the I think it's block 2024. I think I can't remember the exact thing, but like
Yeah.
blocking people, like these mass blocks of the celebrities. Like I think there's like little murky waters in like how you address this.
Yeah.
But being able, like, but if you think about it like from the strategic point, identifying that this is a source of power for these people, and they need this, they need the platform to be able to maintain their wealth, and they'll do what's necessary, means like being able to gain the support. So like taking those kind of perspectives, like how do we identify where the people are that oppress, and I just talk about the Virgin Islands, that oppress people in the Virgin Islands, and how do we like pick at that power, and understand that this isn't like something that's going to get done in a year or two. Like the oppression has been happening for decades and centuries. Like this is long term systems and liberation work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as far as like creating that support that you were mentioning, I think it's going to be easier for it to start small and expand, right? So even using the group that you're in as an example, it's starting small. It started with somebody who obviously works in your industry, it started with an idea. It started with this one person saying, "Hey, I know I can't be the only person who experiences microaggressions. Let me try to connect with others who might be experiencing it as well." And now you guys are in a group and you guys are looking at this together. And you guys are working through it and creating this support for each other. That's going to expand, right? It seems small now, but before you know it, this is going to be a norm in your industry where you guys have enough data to prove what your experiences are. And now that we have concrete evidence of what's being experienced, now the work can go into, okay, what needs to happen so that people are no longer experiencing these things, right? Whether it's a certain amount of training for those who are not POCs, etc. I think, and to answer the question though, I think it starts with your special interests. And in order for something to succeed, there has to be some level of an investment or I guess, your experience with it, right? So it's going to be easy for this group that you're in to take off and grow because it was started by people who are experiencing those microaggressions. Another good example would be, for instance, y'all see how passionate I was about thinking that that teacher was a groomer, right? A good example would be me and other people who take grooming and things such as that seriously and coming up with ways to help our community be able to identify those patterns, right? Usually people who create these things that create change have been through that thing. So like some of the biggest advocates for like abuse survivors are usually abuse survivors themselves. But in order to, again, even be able to do that kind of work, you have to do it within. You have to do it for yourself. An abuse survivor is not going to be able to support and advocate for other abuse survivors if they themselves haven't like processed and worked through what they have been through. So I think it's starting low key right here with this conversation, us connecting with therapists and practitioners and giving those practitioners a platform to show like what's possible. Giving people who have worked through these things a voice, because those who don't have access to like therapy or whatever, or those who are feeling hopeless and think like, oh, it just is what it is. This is the system we're in. It's not going to get better. When we give people who have overcome these things a voice, it gives us a chance to help other people overcome their shit, and it continues to grow. And I think that's a big part of dismantling what's not serving us. And like Tarik said, it's not like an overnight thing. It's not something that's going to happen quickly, because there are things as we speak that we've already overcome when you think about it. Good example. Let's go back to the microaggressions at work, right? Obviously, we know there was a time Black people didn't even have access to the kind of jobs that we have right now, right? So we've already overcome so much, but we still have more to overcome. So we're already doing it. We just need, I think it just needs more visibility. And I think we need to come in contact with people who are already doing the work, who want to do the work, but don't know how to get started, and so on.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's easy for all of us, for people to just feel hopeless and to feel like nothing can be done, but something is being done and something can be done. But I think it starts with special interests.
Yeah, I will say that I've been in a space of feeling hopeless, especially as it relates to things that I've experienced in the workplace and being in this group. I think the thing that has really been helping is that we didn't come to it to necessarily solve like the problem. We came to it just for the sole purpose of like being in community with other people who shared those experiences and learning how to like rest and how to prioritize like healing our bodies or you know, going through the practice of like processing those things, right? The woman who created that group, her name is Dr. Yannick Redwood. She's from Jamaica. And it's interesting that you brought up power mapping, Tarik, because I recently met Dr. Redwood in Seattle and the lecture that she gave was on power mapping. So the minute you said it, and I was like, wow, I just talk about this group and you talk about power mapping. So for people who don't know power mapping, and this is how it was explained in that lecture, so I may get it wrong because it was a while ago, but essentially it's if you was to create like a like, what is that thing called? Just like a grid on a piece of paper, right? And on one side you put people who have power, money, resources, whatever, who are on your side. People who have power, money, resources who are not on your side. And then basically the opposite, people who don't have those resources but are on your team, people who do have those, you know, it's like the four ends or whatever. Power mapping is basically when you're trying to solve an issue, figuring out how to solve that issue using those different types of people wherever they qualify, right? Or groups or organizations. So let's say you were looking at the Virgin Islands and you were trying to solve a problem, and you feel like the government has all of the money, all of the resources, but they might not necessarily be on your team. Who else has the type of influence, money, power that the government has, but is more open to the will and need of the people who we could go around the government to use to solve this issue, right? And it don't necessarily have to be as big and powerful as that. And Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, because I trying to remember it correctly. But like, for example, West Gyul, while we're talking about Alia, is a example of that, in that people were talking about there being a need for these types of events for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that always said, well, the government ain't doing nothing. But instead of leaning into that, what this platform did was look for people who have resources in the same way the government might, and use their resources and their pull and their power to create that space anyway,
Mm-hmm.
without waiting to get that type of space created for them. So obviously this episode was about trauma and processing trauma, but I think for me, where I'm looking to head is like, as I navigate all of these spaces externally that cause me trauma as a person who is not white, like I want to lean more into how community could help play a part in that, even if it's as small as I need to spend time with Black people at least once a week. Like,
Yes.
I live in Arizona. I cannot survive here if I don't see people who look like me and spend time with them and laugh with them and eat food and be in fellowship with them at least once a week. That's how I'm trying to process that type of like trauma in very small ways, is like not necessarily to try to heal from it, but to try to survive in other ways by not being so exposed to the trauma all the time. Like,
maybe lessen its impact on you. Like,
yeah. And I mean, moving might be a part of it because, you know, we planning to move, but like that's a part of the decision, is like, we don't necessarily want to move because like Tucson is the worst place ever, but we recognize that living in a place where there are not as many people who look like us can be traumatic. So we're leaving. Like,
but that's good because that's part of it. And I think that there's a lot of people who spend so much time focusing on what has caused them trauma that they don't take the steps to go in the opposite direction, right? Like, y'all are moving because you recognize the impact that this environment is having on you, as opposed to, because you can't.
And we're able to. I just want to say, like,
and you're
we
in a
are
position
financially
to,
in a position to do it.
That's true, because some people may not be in a position to, but I don't know if this is gonna sound like out of touch, but we have to figure out ways to create some kind of a solution. Even if it's not the ideal solution, we have to create something. Especially, it's one thing to just be unaware that you're experiencing trauma, right? Because that's very possible. There's some people who just genuinely are unaware that they're experiencing like certain symptoms like depression or what have you. But once that awareness is there, and then you're aware of the source, then wouldn't the next step be to create solutions? And not all those solutions are going to be accessible, but then that's where you expand your network in some fashion to get to the best solution for yourself. Is that idealistic or like?
So there's two things. I feel like encompassing everything that the both of you said, and I guess all of us said at some point, there is a need for us to like identify what healing looks like for all of us.
Right.
But there's also a need for people who have the privilege to think bigger and think more expansively to do that work for the people who can't.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we realized after like doing the work for a few years. Like initially it was like, we need to get everybody access to therapy. And if you get a therapist, and these things will be really good. And like therapy is really important. And we won't ever say that, you know, we should like everybody shouldn't have a therapist. But that's not a holistic look at how you solve this issue. Like there's so many different like points where you're not instead of dealing with the trauma of the individual, how about we address the traumatic system in of itself?
Yes.
And the other thing is I remember seeing, and this was like a life-changing lesson that I learned with doing this work with Tamara, was that whenever you challenge systems of power, you need to have a plan and you need to have access to the resources to deal with the retaliation. Like I saw Tamara address an issue and it exploded in a way that like we were dealing with retaliation for months. And like it felt like every day was like a new situation. The good thing is that it showed us like like where the power lies and like
Mm.
how that power and influence could just be wielded to like just really like knock you out because if you don't expect it. But
Yeah.
this time around, it's like, okay, so how do we make sure that whenever the retaliation happens, because it's not if, it's like when it
When.
does,
Yeah.
we have all the resources to turn to. Like now, the issues that we're looking at is far more than just like when you would say like we're dealing with mental health. I know at the beginning I said that we're a behavioral health agency, but like we're doing like food systems work and work in like affordable housing and like
Mm.
Like
healthcare in
systems
general.
change.
Yeah, so like it's much bigger than just like this person needs therapy. It's like we need to make a healthier system.
Sometimes we are experiencing trauma as a result of capitalism. We are experiencing trauma as a result of like systems of oppression. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it is this traumatic experience that has happened to you, but especially for people of color listening to this episode, especially for Black people listening to this episode, like the things that you're trying to process in terms of like walking with your therapist, just understand that like you are also navigating a wall that like is inherently traumatic because of white supremacy for a person existing in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you can lean into community, if you can like do things to try to remove yourself from those spaces the best way you can, like I would encourage you to do so. Not obviously there's like no permanent solution, but just being around my people sometimes is so healing for me in ways that therapy sometimes can't be. I don't even know what else to say on that. Like sometimes being with my friends, laughing with my friends is better than therapy for me. And it's not to say I'm gonna stop going to therapy, but sometimes I need a happy hour. Sometimes I need to just go
Absolutely.
sit in a park and watch people play with their kids. Like there's no one way to heal. There's no one way to process things. Like I hate to asking people if they have any last words. It sounds so morbid, but do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. I think I think if this was like 5 years ago, I would have wondered like how we get from trauma to where we are right now in this conversation. But like after doing the work and like just gaining more understanding of it, like trauma work and mental health work is social justice,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
systems work, and there's no other way to approach that kind of work. So if you actually want to make that change, whether it's an individual level or whether it's like on a macro level, like there is no one focus. There's how do we address a system that's inherently traumatic, and how do we change it so we can thrive in it or dismantle it so it doesn't exist anymore, whichever radical way you want with it.
So I would love to have a conversation on this back home. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
conversations have already happened. I'm sure there's plenty of people doing this kind of work, but like I feel like I've been having these conversations a lot in Black American spaces, and they've been so helpful for me, but I want to have more of them with my own people. Like I would love
Mm-hmm.
to come home and just sit on a beach and talk about this. Like not even some formal conference on like this type of community work, but like I would love to like hang out with people and talk about this stuff outside of
Mm-hmm.
just the social media space because I feel like we need more conversations like this for sure. So thank you so much, Tarik, for coming on and being our resident expert on this. And yeah, Deidre, any final thoughts?
No. I look forward to seeing the listeners' response to this. I hope it's a helpful episode, and I hope that y'all check out Greater Changes. One, because hello, therapy is that girl, but also because they're, one of our sponsors this season.
Period. By the way, thank you, Greater Changes, for being a season
Can I
sponsor. We
just
appreciate
say,
y'all.
like being online, like, so for those who don't have, access to the video footage, Tarik is recording this from his office, and I'm not gonna lie, it's making me miss in-person therapy because before the pandemic, when my first ever therapist, I used to go to her office, and I actually really loved going to her office. I used to look forward to therapy. I love me some therapy, okay? I love therapy. So I used to go to her. She was really hard to book, so I ended up ghosting her. But then when I went back to therapy, this was right before the pandemic really kicked off, and I ended up with another therapist, and I used to go to her office too. And then of course, once the quarantine started, we had to switch to telehealth. And she and I still worked together for like 2.5 years. Maybe we worked together for a really long time. But me gonna lie, like I'm kind of missing being in a therapist's chair. And now I'm like, am I gonna start looking? But my thing is like I feel kind of silly, like like those people who become dependent on pills. I'm like, am I becoming one of those people? Because I have no reason to go to therapy right now. Like I'm just gonna be taking up space for somebody who needs therapy, all because I
I
want to sit in a
mean,
therapist's chair.
I think when you feel it's time, and
Because I feel like I'm in a good place. I feel like what I'm gonna go do, like, because that's part of why me and my last therapist broke up. It was one because she left the practice, but we were kind of dwindling to this point where like our sessions were kind of like there was really nothing to talk about, and we used to be talking. There was a point where she and I were literally talking about the show You and like Bridgerton and shit, like, and we kind of started to recognize, okay, we don't have to talk as often as we do because we're good, and
yeah.
I don't want to go to therapy just because I want to sit in a therapist's chair and enjoy the ambiance. Like I feel like that would be such a like such a waste of space. Like when there's people who really need a therapist's time, like yeah,
Yeah.
I may be paying for it. Shit, I would rather for that. I rather find out. Oh, maybe I should do that. Like create a GoFundMe so people could donate to help people who can't afford therapy get access to therapy. Because I'm like, that money I would be spending in a therapist chair when I really don't need to be seeing them. I could be paying for somebody who don't have
Yeah.
access to therapy.
Yeah, maybe it's a like a mutual aid opportunity to make sure that people have opportunities to access therapy that
That
don't
would
have
be
insurance or
dope. And with that being
So
said, for all of our listeners who are listening to this, if you've been to therapy, I would love for y'all to share your experiences with therapy, especially the positive ones, because I want to see us normalize like going to therapy because people are still kind of like nervous about it. So I would like to see us like share
so
those experiences.
I feel like Tamara would absolutely just like yell at me if I because this spot slipped my mind like completely. Right now we're doing Caribbean Faces. I can't believe I forget this entire thing. Caribbean Faces is our like public health campaign to normalize mental health and
Mhm.
normalize like therapy and go into therapy. So right now it's people sharing their like exactly what you just said. Like how many forget it. Okay. Sharing their mental health journeys, whether it was going to therapy or not.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and just showing like like this is what mental health looks like. There isn't a
Mm.
specific look. There isn't like one way that this happens.
Mm.
There's a Caribbean perspective to this.
Mhm.
So
Oh.
How
yeah,
can people participate?
so you, geez, this is usually like the part that Tamara does. So,
I
but I
could
have it
edit, don't
here. So,
worry.
um, sharing a picture of you,
Uh,
and then tagging greater changes on X or Facebook, and then telling a story in the caption. So, sharing a mental health journey. And the whole purpose is like to inspire and connect with other people who also experience something that's very similar, but feels like no one else is experiencing this.
Mm.
Um, and then using the hashtags Caribbean Faces.
Okay, cool. We're
Yeah.
gonna participate.
Yeah.
We're gonna participate because I don't know. I just love therapy. I think therapy is that girl. Okay, like
Hmm.
I take mental health so seriously, and I want to see mental health become. You know how people go and they get their annual visit with their doctor and they get their blood work. I want to see like mental health be just as
Teen
prioritized.
and yeah.
Like I want to see that because it's a part of our overall health. So I love that y'all are doing that. I'm gonna participate in the Caribbean Faces Challenge. I want to see, listen, if you've ever thought about going to therapy, if you are looking for a therapist, anything like that, reach out to them. I don't know how their consultation process works, so I'm gonna let them speak for themselves.
The
You
website
know,
is in our episode description and it's laid out very easily. You could look up the types of services that they offer, learn more about grades that changes, and definitely contact them that way.
and you also don't have to have gone through some crazy traumatic event to need therapy either.
Hmm.
Like
If
I
you
think
feel
some
like you need
people,
therapy, go to therapy
yeah, I
for
think there's a
anything.
lot of people when they think of therapy, they either think you have to be like mentally ill or like have like having experienced something extremely traumatic, but you might find yourself like in a situation, in a part of your life right now where things just feel strange and odd and you need guidance, and your friends can't quite support you in the ways that you need, because also it's kind of unfair to lean on your friends to constantly be the ones to give you advice through everything you're going through. Like that kind of makes your friendship a little bit, I don't know if that like affects friendship dynamics, but I think if your friends and siblings are the only people you're going to for support, especially if things are constantly changing, then you might want to think about going and talking to a therapist a little bit, like it's lit. It's lit.
But with that being said, thank you all so much for listening. We will see y'all right back here next week for our second to last episode of this season. Again, just a reminder that we're having our first live event in Atlanta, June 8th at Zona Caribbean. All of the information is available on our social media. You could get your tickets at goodupvi.com. Do not wait till the last minute to get your tickets. Get them now. And yeah, we love y'all. Bye. Deidre, tell the people them bye.
Bye.
The Good Up Podcast is sponsored by the Virgin Islands Lottery. This podcast is Virgin Islands hosted and produced by Deidre Ritter and Heiza Quinones Ivory. Follow us on all social media platforms at Good Up Pod. Join the VIP section over at patreon.com/gooduppodcast and get access to exclusive bonus content, or visit our website and read more about our episodes at goodupvi.com. This season of the Good Up Podcast is proud to be sponsored by Empath Psychological Services, The Blend Collective, and Greater Changes.